All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to another explainer where we take complex, layered narratives and really break them down into their core structural elements. Today, we are unpacking Bret Easton Ellis's infamous 1991 novel, American Psycho. Now, culturally, you probably know this book primarily as a shocking, gruesome horror story. But when we actually sit down and analyze the text, we start to see that it's functioning on a completely different level. It's actually this razor-sharp, incredibly repetitive, and super deliberate dissection of the absolute emptiness of 1980s Wall Street culture. And the lens through which we view this whole bizarre world is the fractured psyche of Patrick Bateman, a wealthy, elite investment banker who just so happens to be living a violent, psychopathic double life. So throughout this explainer, we're going to look at exactly how the source material uses stuff like relentless brand names, monotonous daily routines, and escalating violence to construct a massive, glaring allegory about society. So here is our roadmap for today as we trace Bateman's descent. We'll kick things off with the surface world, look at the cracks in the mask, examine the escalation of violence, follow his total psychological collapse, and finally, we'll unpack the ultimate critique.
All right, let's get into part one, the surface world.
The narrative actually opens up with Bateman and his colleague Tim Price heading to dinner at Harry's on April Fool's Day. And honestly, this is a brilliant setting by Ellis because it instantly foreshadows the overarching theme of deception right out of the gate. From the very first pages, we are completely immersed in the superficial gossip of Manhattan elites. Just notice Bateman's completely monotonous routine here. We have to read through these endless, exhausting details about his exclusive health club workouts, his mundane trips to the dry cleaners, dinners at absurdly expensive restaurants like Pastel's, and his obsessive grooming rituals. I mean, this relentless list of status symbols, the designer suits, the ties, the hair products, it visually communicates his compulsive need to control appearances. The text is just saturated with brand names. It's incredibly repetitive, and that repetition is right there to mirror the sheer monotony and the total emptiness of his everyday life. And you know, this emptiness, it completely bleeds into his personal life too. Just look at his relationship with his fiancée, Evelyn. The source text explicitly paints this as a shallow, completely transactional relationship. Bateman treats her with absolute indifference. To even cope with his own existence, he numbs himself heavily with Valium, and he spends his downtime obsessively renting and rewatching films at the local video store. It perfectly illustrates his total inability to experience genuine intimacy. He's disconnected from his own emotions and entirely disconnected from the people around him.
Moving right along to part two, cracks in the mask.
As his carefully constructed facade begins to slip, we start to see that Bateman's social circle is actually entirely interchangeable. Whether they're at Tuesday lunches or concerts or the elite Yale Club, his friends are constantly confusing each other's identities. Literally, no one knows who anyone else really is, which really underscores the total dehumanization of consumer culture. But the crucial turning point is where this polished corporate exterior violently collides with his brutal reality. This is highlighted in the famous business card scene. Bateman becomes absurdly, furiously envious of his colleague Paul Owen. But get this, he isn't envious of Owen's character or his work ethic. He is obsessively jealous over the font and the paper quality of Owen's superior business card. This petty, superficial capitalist vanity is what triggers Bateman's descent into overt violence, culminating in him literally murdering Owen with an axe. The juxtaposition here is just jarring and darkly hilarious. An extreme, brutal murder sparked by a slightly better piece of paper stock. After the murder of Owen, and a genuinely grotesque act of violence against his ex-girlfriend Bethany, the tension really ratchets up. We are introduced to Detective Kimball, who's looking into Paul Owen's disappearance. And what plays out is this fascinating dynamic. You have Detective Kimball conducting very polite, respectful, methodical questioning, which heavily contrasts with Bateman's intense, rapid, and spiraling internal panic. Kimball simply cannot fathom that a wealthy, well-dressed, elite investment banker could be capable of such brutality. It hits the nail on the head regarding the source text's assertion about society we are utterly blind to evil, just so long as that evil is cloaked in immense wealth and privilege. Which brings us to part 3, the escalation of violence. From here, Bateman's actions move into something much, much darker. Tracing this descent into chaos, his violence becomes increasingly grotesque and completely indiscriminate. We jump from horrifying acts like killing a child at the zoo and torturing women with a rat to these entirely surreal, action movie-style sequences. I mean, he takes an Uzi to his gym, he goes on this massive, chaotic killing spree, fleeing past Chase Manhattan, and he even ends up absurdly shooting a handgun at a police helicopter.
Ellis is deliberately destabilizing the reader here. He's flooding the narrative with these shocking extreme details that practically force us to confront the absolute horror hiding just beneath the shiny consumerist clamor. But as this spree escalates into total absurdity, the text introduces a really vital question. By definition, a hallucination is a perception in the absence of an external stimulus that feels incredibly real. During these chaotic chapters, Ellis purposefully blurs the line between reality and hallucination. As Bateman is shooting at helicopters and going on these wild rampages without facing any real-world consequences, we really have to ask ourselves, are these crimes actually happening? Or is this the sign of a psyche that is actively and completely collapsing in on itself? And that naturally leads us into part 4, total psychological collapse. Entering the final chronological phase of the book, Bateman's unraveling becomes totally undeniable. He makes this incredibly hollow visit to the Sandstone facility to see his mother, who suffers from dementia, and it's a scene that just heavily reinforces the bleakness of his world. But the defining moment of this psychological collapse happens around Valentine's Day. Bateman actually confesses. He explicitly details his murders to his lawyer. And how does his lawyer react? He completely dismisses it as a hilarious joke. He doesn't even believe Bateman is capable of it and actually mistakes Bateman for someone else entirely. It's the ultimate dark irony of the novel and the absolute proof of the emptiness of his relationships. Society is willfully blind. Even when the monster literally screams his confession at them, the elite bubble simply refuses to hear it. The novel finally comes to a close at the end of the 1980s. Bateman is sitting in a brand new, hyper-exclusive club after a bizarre encounter with a taxi driver, and he fixates on a sign on a door that simply reads, "This is not an exit." It's such a powerful, haunting final quote. It shows that Bateman realizes he is permanently trapped. There is no catharsis here. There's no justice. There is literally no escape from his existential reality or the superficial, consumer-driven hell that he inhabits. Which leaves us staring down this massive, lingering question. Were the crimes real, or were they simply the delusions of a completely fractured mind? The genius of the source material is that Ellis intentionally leaves this ambiguous. By refusing to spoon-feed us a definitive answer, the text forces us to shift our focus away from the literal slasher movie plot and instead directs our attention to the much deeper, satirical meaning behind Bateman's entire existence. Finally, let's wrap things up with Part 5, the ultimate critique. When we pull all of these threads together, the allegory of violence in American Psycho actually delivers 3 incredibly scathing societal critiques. First up, 1980s capitalism. The endless obsession with wealth, brand names, and superior business cards exposes the total emptiness of a status-driven society where a person's worth is just reduced to a label. Second, the text violently tackles toxic masculinity. Bateman's horrific, completely unchecked violence against women is presented by the author as a reflection of the deep-seated systemic misogyny within that hyper-competitive boys' club culture. And finally, society's blindness. The fact that his own lawyer completely ignores a direct confession demonstrates exactly how extreme privilege and wealth act as an impenetrable shield, blinding society to the evil standing right in front of its face. So we really have to ask ourselves, as we look back at Bateman's hollow, brand-obsessed world, how much of this was truly just a dark fiction of the 1980s, and how much of it still reflects the masks we wear today? Definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's beneath the surface.